Awesome. This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. And we have with us at WZRD, City of Chicago Inspector General Deborah Witzburg. How are you today, Deborah?
Good, thanks. Good, thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you. So we have always heard that there are inspector generals and they keep a watchful eye on the government. And sometimes inspector generals seem to not have enough enforcement power. What does your office do, and how much enforcement power do you have?
Well, we are, in terms of what we do, we are an independent, nonpartisan watchdog agency within city government here in the city of Chicago. And the mission of the office is to promote economy, effectiveness, efficiency, and integrity in the operation of city government. So we do that in basically in three ways. We have three channels of work. The first thing we do is misconduct investigations. If somebody in city government is accused of breaking the rules, whether that's the ethics ordinance or a city policy or a criminal law, we investigate those allegations of wrongdoing, of misconduct. The second area of our work is program and policy work, where we are looking at whether programs and operations of city government are working as well as they should, whether city government is as effective, as efficient, and as equitable in the distribution of city services as it should be. And then the third and final area of our work is transparency work. That work is driven by the notion that information about the government belongs to the governed. And in that area of focus, we work to make information about city government in Chicago meaningfully publicly accessible so that Chicagoans can, in a reasonably easy way, get access to information about their government.
Mhm. So if people were to want to FOIA some information about their local government and they're not able to get the FOIA information, would they come to you?
They could. And in fact, some of the transparency work we do is driven by the observation that FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, is one mechanism for people to get a hold of public information, but it's a challenging one. FOIA requests can be very burdensome and they can take a long time. And then even when a government agency releases information in response to a FOIA request, it is generally only released to the one individual who asked for it. Which can be really challenging if the goal is a kind of larger transparency mission. And so we work to make the information that you can get in FOIA in response to a FOIA request, that information is theoretically publicly available, but that is different than it being meaningfully publicly accessible. And so we try to close the gap. We try to address some needs that are not addressed by the Freedom of Information Act.
Mhm. And if you help businesses too, in what way do you help businesses interact better with uh, the city of Chicago?
Yeah, well, the mission of the office, I think, when it comes to city government is very much in line with the needs of people doing business in the city of Chicago. We are trying to build a stable, accountable, effective city government. And I think that that's the kind of city government which would make the stable, prosperous environment, which would be healthy for businesses here in the city of Chicago. Some of the direct interaction we have with business owners comes from the fact that people doing business with the city of Chicago and people holding licenses in the city of Chicago have certain obligations under city ordinances, including to cooperate with our office, and certain obligations under the city's ethics ordinance, including around campaign finance restrictions. That is to say, limitations on how much license owners and people seeking to do business or actually doing business with the city are allowed to contribute to the political campaigns of city officials.
Mm. Sometimes that works out the other way too. We've heard of instances in which incumbents would pressure businesses to donate to support their campaigns or retaliate if the businesses want to support an opponent. How do you investigate those allegations as well if people come to you?
Yes, absolutely we do. And if people who have those sorts of concerns should absolutely reach out to our office. Our website is at igchicago.org. And on our website, there is all kinds of information about how to contact our intake specialists, and we'd be happy to take any sort of information. We are very much of the view that a for sale sign does not belong on the door to City Hall, and so people's ability to do business with and in this city should not rest on their support of a certain political candidate or anything like that.
Mhm. And in what ways after you do the investigation, do you bring any results to the enforcement agency that would handle the results of the investigation? How is the process?
That's a good question, and I'm sorry. I know you asked about enforcement power in your first question, and I didn't get to it. So, enforcement of our work looks a little bit different depending on what kind of work we are doing. So, if, for example, we are investigating violations of the ethics ordinance, then we will come to an investigative conclusion, and we will send our case to the city's Board of Ethics, and they conduct an enforcement proceeding. They have various steps in that process to ultimately collect a fine, for example. If we are investigating violations of a criminal law, then we work with a prosecuting agency as an investigative partner. So we will work with either the U.S. Attorney's Office or the Attorney General or the state's Attorney's Office, and we will work with them to see criminal charges brought as an enforcement mechanism. With others of our cases, when we are conducting investigations into whether city actors have violated other city rules and policies, then enforcement in the end is really up to City Hall. It really is up to the city departments where people work who are accused of wrongdoing. What we do is we reach an investigative conclusion, and then we make a recommendation to the city department to enact some sort of discipline for someone having broken the rules.
And when you do launch investigations, is it that if you receive multiple complaints about that situation, and then that launches it, or does it vary case by case?
Yeah, it really varies. It really varies case by case. We get between 8 and 10,000 intakes in a year, and so we certainly cannot pursue every one of those. And so we spend a lot of time and devote a lot of thinking to making prioritization decisions, to deciding where we can and should focus our oversight resources. And the way that we try to think about doing that is we try to focus on problems where we have the best opportunity to restore some public trust, to foster some public confidence in the government. I often think that the city of Chicago operates at a tremendous deficit of legitimacy with its residents. For many decades, for generations, in fact, the city has given people every reason to assume the worst when something goes wrong in city government. And so we try to focus our work in those areas where we have the best opportunity to pay down that deficit of legitimacy, to get at the problems which really drive mistrust and distrust in city government.
Mm. There was a recent case, I think it was against the Alderman Jim Gardner. I think he was blocking some people from his Facebook page, and there was a complaint against that. And I think your office actually found enough evidence, but somehow the hearing officer did not agree, and then those those there's no further enforcement concerning that. Right.
Well, I won't comment on any particular case, but I'll say that we continue to aggressively pursue violations of the ethics ordinance. Those are the rules which stand between Chicagoans and a government that they have no reason to trust.
Mhm.
So we will continue the hard work of enforcing the city's ethics rules.
Mhm. So do you find it difficult? Is there so you have to work with many levels of the city in order to do your job. But if some of those levels are really not that interested in the transparency, how do you get around that?
Certainly part of the challenge of our work is that other actors in city government, other city departments and officials are part partner in and part subject of our work. And part of our jobs is to navigate that. I think fundamentally, I think if we are not all pulling in roughly the same direction, if we are not all here to build a better city government for Chicagoans, then at least some of us are in the wrong line of work. And so where we find opportunities to work cooperatively with other city officials and city departments, we do that very enthusiastically. And when we are on different sides of an issue, we navigate that thoughtfully.
So what in your background prepared you for this position?
Well, I was a Cook County prosecutor before I did this work, and that is a job that gave me insights into a lot of the ways things work and don't work, particularly in the policing and public safety sphere. And so I spent a lot of my time in this office working on police oversight, police accountability, and public safety reform. And much of that work really was informed by the kind of insights into the criminal justice system that I gained as a prosecutor. It's also, that job really sharpened my sense of the tremendous responsibility of government to be a force of good. Local government in particular touches people's lives in so many ways in the course of a day. And that every one of those touch points with local government in someone's day-to-day life is an opportunity for effective and efficient and equitable service, or it is an opportunity for things to go wrong. And so having seen a lot of those interactions between local government and people's lives in my prior work, that's one of the things that I brought to this job.
Mm. What is the difference between acting as a prosecutor and as the inspector general? The glaring differences. There seem to be similarities and differences. Maybe if you explain those more to our listeners, they will understand how better to approach your office if they do have a complaint.
Sure. So as a prosecutor, we brought to trial cases in which someone had been charged with committing a crime. And of course, there's a wide range of criminal offenses in Illinois, but everything we handled was a criminal offense. And so, those range from driving under the influence or driving on a suspended license all the way to violent crime and everything in between. Here in this office, we are equipped to deal with a bigger range of things that go wrong, which is to say most of the cases we investigate here don't necessarily rise to the level of a criminal offense, but rather somebody has broken the rules in some other way. Somebody has, violated the ethics ordinance, or they have violated a city policy, or a member of the police department has broken the police department's rules, etc. So we have access to a kind of wider range of things that go wrong. And when we are looking at something that does rise to the level of a criminal offense or might, then, as I say, we have an opportunity to work with our partners in all of the local prosecutors' offices.
Mm. We do hear of people that try to approach aldermen and complain to them about the various issues, but they're not accessible, or they actually refuse to speak with them. And then some of those people, they want to speak with you. Is that a proper avenue to go if something like that happens? And it does happen often.
Whenever something goes wrong in city government, we are anxious to hear from Chicagoans about it. So if they have, if they've had a bad experience, or they're concerned about something, or they have a suggestion for something that could go better, or any of those things, we would be very happy to hear from them. We only know what people tell us. And one of the ways that we go about this exercise that we talked about of prioritizing our work is by listening as best we can to Chicagoans telling us what they are worried about. That's one of the ways we make our decisions about which work to prioritize and which things we need to try to get at. So we would be very happy to hear from people about any concerns that they have about interactions that they've had with city government, or, as I say, any suggestions they have for things that could go better in government here in the city.
And it seems when you spoke about the parallels and differences between prosecutors' job and your job, it seems as if the prosecutor doesn't have to do that much investigation. The police, law enforcement has done the investigation already, but your office uh, has to do the investigation as well, right?
Depends a little bit for prosecutors on the kind of case, how much of the investigation they are involved in. But we are an investigative agency. That's right. So we don't try our own cases. We are not the trial lawyers when our cases go to court. The city's law department, or one of our prosecuting partners, are the people who take these cases to court. But you're right. We are an investigating agency.
Mhm. and you're kind of like in that gray area between the prosecutor's office and the police. Some items that fit neither with one or the other end up with you.
Sometimes.
Do you do you feel that there's uh, enough oversight? With the amount of work that you have to uh, do to help help further transparency and ethics. Uh, is your office enough to handle all that you have to do, and do you have enough resources to do your job?
I really appreciate this question. I will say, it is not a lack of resources, which is frankly our biggest challenge. The biggest challenge in doing our work is in protecting the independence of the office and the independence of the oversight work we do. So independence from the entities we oversee, that is the lifeblood and the hallmark of effective inspector general work. That's how this kind of oversight is designed to work so that we can operate without fear or favor, as they say, so that we can pursue issues where they arise, even when that is inconvenient or unflattering for those in political power. And so we do have, I think there are real challenges around the office's independence. There are ways in which here in the city of Chicago, the entity we oversee, that is to say Chicago City Hall, has more ability to impair the independence of our work than other government entities do. Chicago has fallen behind the national standards and the federal law on independent oversight. And so I'm concerned about that. That is, from my perspective, the biggest challenge in doing our work, more so than a lack of resources. And so we are working with some of our partners in the city council to try to address some of those places in the law which allow for impairments of our independence. But I think that is the biggest challenge.
Mhm. So that was my next question. What is your wish list to improve the effectiveness of your office? So that's one of them, right? To
Yeah.
have ordinances passed where you get more cooperation.
Yeah, that's right. I think the two kind of biggest ticket items, the two things I would wish for most, would be to update and clarify Chicago's law on 2 points, both of them simply to bring Chicago, as I said, into line with national standards and the federal law. So one of those points has to do with Inspector General access to materials that the city claims are attorney-client privilege. So the city uses attorney-client privilege, which is an idea that people are sometimes familiar with in the context of an individual person being represented by an attorney. The city will use a privilege asserted on behalf of the city to prevent us, a city department, from accessing those materials, even though all city employees and officials and departments have a duty to cooperate with our office, have a duty to cooperate with our work. At the federal level and in other oversight offices, it is very, very clear that inspectors general are entitled to access to privileged documents. This is, for example, long established practice in federal parts of the federal government, like the Department of Justice and the Department of Defense. And so Chicago needs to kind of come into line with the national standards on that question. And then relatedly, the city's law department has made a practice of demanding to have the mayor's lawyers sit in on interviews when OIG is conducting confidential interviews. And that, from my perspective, is a real problem. That's another area where Chicago is really out of line with the national standards and the federal laws. That is not allowed to happen elsewhere with other offices of inspectors general. And I think it's important. It seems a little bit in the weeds, but I think it's really important because if people have concerns about misconduct at the highest levels of city government, I don't know that we can ask those people to come in and give us good and candid information about it with the mayor's lawyers, staring them down from across the table. So I think really in order to protect the independence and the effectiveness of our work, those two things really need to change. And Chicago really needs to come in line with the clearly prevailing standards.
what is the difference between the law of discovery and them actually sitting there? Because if you were to interview somebody and then you have that uh, transcript, are you required to give it to the law department anyway, or inspectors general cases are different from prosecutorial cases?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our investigative work is confidential. It is confidential from everybody while it is ongoing, and that's for lots of reasons, including to protect city employees from retaliation. City employees have for a long time in this town worried that they might suffer professional consequences and personal consequences if they blow the whistle on something that's going wrong in city government. And I think that those concerns have frankly been well founded historically. So our investigative work is confidential from everybody while it's going on. And then once we are finished, that work is still subject to very specific confidentiality rules depending on where the work is going to go, depending on what happens. But certainly during the course of an investigation, while we are conducting investigative steps like interviews, that work is confidential. And so I think, having one of the mayor's lawyers sit in an interview where they can hear the information that somebody is giving and take that information back to City Hall. I mean, the concern that raises, right, is that a whistleblower could come in for an interview, and if the mayor's lawyer is sitting in the room, then that person could find themselves on the receiving end of job retaliation, for example, for whatever information they might have provided about something that's going wrong in City Hall.
But if they do get retaliated against, then they could come back to you. Are you able to disclose whether that ever happened?
We do get retaliation complaints, and we certainly have investigated those.
Mhm.
I should say,
How?
just to be clear on the interview point, sorry, just very quickly, just to be perfectly clear here, it is always true that if we are interviewing someone who is the subject, who is under investigation by us, that person is absolutely entitled to be accompanied by their lawyer when we are interviewing them. That person gets to have their lawyer in the room. The mayor does not get to have his lawyer in the room.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's perfectly understandable, and I'm very surprised that the city is able to get away with this because if they're violating federal law on inspectors general's uh, uh, rights, that's how are they able to get away with it?
I'm a little surprised by it too, to be perfectly candid. But we have some pending legislation in City Council, which is we are doing some work to try to close these gaps in the municipal code of the City of Chicago, so that everybody's obligations and entitlements are clarified, and I'm hopeful that we'll resolve those issues.
Oh, so in other words, the municipal code had something in it that gave that the loophole so that that the city would benefit from being able to do this, to have a city lawyer sit in on these conversations.
That is how the law department has read the municipal code.
Oh.
we,
Mhm.
we read it differently, but that is how they have read it. And so that's why we are working with the city council to clarify those provisions in the law, to make absolutely clear that the municipal code of the city of Chicago aligns with these national standards and with the federal law on these two issues.
Would it make sense to actually bring it to a lawsuit and then have a judge rule on whether the city is properly interpreting the code?
Yeah, that's one of the things that this office has tried in the past. These are issues that have been going on in various forms actually for a very long time. And so many years ago, this office sued the city's corporation council. That case went all the way to the Illinois Supreme Court. The determination of the Illinois Supreme Court back in 2013 was that this office, the Office of Inspector General, cannot sue the city because we are part of the city. We are a component of the municipal corporation. And so a lawsuit against the city is not the right mechanism to resolve this issue. But in fact, that's a very helpful determination by the court in kind of thinking this through, because it is precisely because the Office of Inspector General is part of the city that it's extremely clear that we have to have access to all of the city's records, including records where attorney-client privilege would prevent disclosure to a third party. We're not a third party, we're part of the city. And so a lawsuit against the city won't be the right mechanism to resolve these, but as I say, I am hopeful that these issues will be resolved by legislation in the city council.
Absolutely. Uh, when you let's see, it has so when the law department lawyers are sitting in on these conversations, is this during your administration of the Inspector General's office, or has this been ongoing for a long time?
Um, the law department has been making this demand since before I took office as Inspector General. During my term, during my administration, we have not permitted law department attorneys to sit in on our interviews. So that is something which was allowed prior to my administration. We no longer allow that.
Oh, okay. And do they complain about it then? Do they say, "Oh, we should be allowed," but you reject them?
That's right. It has meant in some situations that there have been interviews which we've simply been unable to conduct. And so one of the problems with this practice is that there is just some information which we've been unable to bring to light, or which we've had, to go about less effective, more time consuming methods to try to get the same information.
If our
If our
listeners want to learn more about you and then also file a complaint, where should they go?
They should go to our website. It's at igchicago.org. All of the information about how to reach our intake unit is there. All of the reports we have published are up on our website, along with lots of information about the office and lots of information on what's called our information portal, lots of city data as part of that transparency work that we talked about.
And also, if people wanted to follow up with their cases, that's not possible, right? They just file and then just wait to see what happens.
That's right, most of the time. Because of our confidentiality rules, we are very limited in what sort of updates we're able to provide for people. There are certain limited exceptions. People are certainly welcome to reach out to us. If there's any information we can share, we will do that. We may not be able to, but we will always be happy to hear from people.
And investigations that are listed that are ongoing, how many of those are listed on the website so that at least people know about uh, the state of some of what is going on?
The best place to find information about our investigative work is in our quarterly reports. So 4 times a year, we issue a report which contains some high level information about ongoing investigations, and then also contains de-identified summaries of concluded investigations where we have found misconduct. So we talked a lot about our confidentiality obligations. We never name any names of the people involved in administrative cases, but we do publish de-identified summaries of that work in our quarterly reports. That's the best place to find that information, and those are all available on our website as well.
By de-identified, you mean that they would know what's happening in the case, but they don't know the parties involved.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Thank you so much, City of Chicago Inspector General Deborah Witzburg, for joining us today. And thank you so much for all this information. It will be very valuable to our listeners.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.